Hello and welcome to Your Health in Your Hands. I'm Dr. David Ajibade with the Brain and Body Foundation. We have a very special guest on today. As you know, mental health, things like depression, anxiety, all the angst, things going on around the world, suicidal ideations, all issues are just exploding all over the world with regards to mental health. And as we know, we Nigerians, we Africans tend not to acknowledge these things as much. But we are beginning to see that we cannot keep on going that way. It's becoming more and more important for us to acknowledge that there is such a thing as mental health and the need to take care of your mental health, and also the need to seek professional help whenever it is warranted. And so on our show today, I have a very, very special guest, a very good friend. We've known each other since, let's see how many, not to reveal our exact ages, but for the past 3 or 4 decades. We both got into medical school at the same time, and we've been friends ever since. So without further ado, I want to say welcome, Dr. Olayiwola Ajileye.
Thank you very much, Tayo, CEO of Brain and Body Foundation, for having me on your show today. It's been long coming, actually.
It's been long coming, yes. We've been talking about this for a while. I'm so glad you're able to make time. All right, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that among your many hats, you are also the head of the INCOMSA, which is and tell us about, just give us a brief overview of you and how great you are in the world. Just kidding.
Yeah, I think you know a lot about me, but I think for our viewers, it's important to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Olayiwola Ajileye. I'm a consultant psychiatrist. I work in acute care and crisis intervention with Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Foundation Trust in the United Kingdom. To put it in context, Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Trust is the largest mental health trust, our second largest mental health trust in England, and it also houses the National Center for Mental Health. So we obviously are tertiary referral centers, and we do provide a wide range of mental health facilities and services for a large number of people within our environment, and of course, by extension to the whole world. And in addition to my practice as a consultant psychiatrist, I'm also a legal and forensic physician, in which case I work in forensic and legal field, working with the police, working with the criminal justice systems in various aspects of, pre-custodial mental health and forensic services. I do plenty of medical legal work with His Majesty Courts. And in addition to that, I do provide consultancy services to various organizations, NGOs for mental health problems.
And in addition to that, that's a lot. That's many hats. But in addition to that, also you are representing Ibadan Old Students Association. Tell us about that a little bit too.
Yes, absolutely. I'm also the president of Ibadan College of Medicine Alumni Association, United Kingdom and Ireland, which is alumni association that encompasses graduates of their College of Medicines from different specialties and disciplines, including medicine, dentistry, physiotherapy, biochemistry, human nutrition, and nursing and pharmacy. So we, in the United Kingdom and Ireland, we have over 1,000 members. So I am the president of the UK and Ireland chapter.
Yeah, it's amazing how you find time to do all that. But thank you for your service so much. And I also want to say thank you for the support you've been giving to our foundation, both financially and in terms of helping raise awareness about the work that we're doing in Nigeria with the children, whether with sickle cell disease or brain disorder. So I want to take this opportunity to say a big thank you for all your help.
You're welcome, Dayo.
All right, so let's get into it. We know, and I've been telling our audiences, that all over the world, mental health issues have been exploding, especially since after the COVID-19. Before COVID-19, the pandemic, And everybody knew there was something like depression and suicidal ideations, but this pandemic has changed a lot of things. And we're going to get into Nigerians and Africans in general, especially with those who are moving from country to country, the specific challenges they face. But just have an overview of how the whole mental health landscape has changed over the last 3 or 4 years.
Well, obviously, we know the effect of the pandemic being a very global, crisis, and that itself, brought us to a different new world of challenges in terms of mental health adjustment. Um, Coming with the pandemic was significant isolation, significant destruction of economic activities, um, huge amount of grief because of losses to businesses, losses to individuals and families. So a lot of, landscape of losses and emptiness. There's been a lot of people who have taken into drug and alcohol problems as a result of that, while they were all incarcerated and all in lockdown. We know what happened. It was a very, very trying times for everybody. It was an
Yes.
unprecedented kind of scenario, which we, in our generation, I don't think we've ever seen such a thing before. And the impact of that is huge in terms of the effect of mental health. So we have seen an increasing prevalence of various mental health disorders, ranging from depression, anxiety, linked with anxiety and depression, suicidal disorder. And these are driven by significant economic and personal stressors, some of which we're going to be talking about. We know the effect of, the COVID-19 pandemic also was the effect on family life, a lot of separations, a lot of disintegration of relationships, a lot of domestic violence. So these are all, social factors and drivers for serious mental health problems, which we have seen increasing, numbers and percentages of populations presenting with the effect of this to our clinics in recent times. People have never experienced such a huge amount of stressors in their lives. So it's a new trend for us. It's a new trend, and we're seeing people adjusting to this thing in different ways. And some people have maladjustment, situations as well, whereby they're presenting with, new problems. People who are developing conversion disorders, and people who are presenting with suicidal ideations, people are presenting with, significant, amount of new onset, psychotic disorders, because
Simply because is that simply because they are unable to cope with this new burden that has been placed upon them as a result of the pandemic, or are we talking about other things?
Yeah, the concept of coping varies from one individual. The strength we have, the innate strength we have for individual varies. And with the COVID, pandemic, it was an enormous amount of stressors that sort of tip people over the edge. So we could say that it was like the elastic limit was, exceeded basically, and people, were breaking down under the huge weight, of all these problems. And people have different ways of coping, but traditional ways of coping with stressors just broke down. Family relationship broke down. We would normally rely on one another, society, social capital that you have built up in one way or the other. But we know the effect of, the pandemic was that we couldn't even relate to each other. You couldn't even have physical contact, with people that you have known who would have supported you over the time. Not minding the economic effect of that, the catastrophic effect on people's jobs and livelihoods, inability to maintain their, economic activities, inability to meet their financial needs. And these are all new stressors, and it just overwhelmed everyone. It overwhelmed not only individuals, even the system, globally, regionally. It overwhelmed everybody. We were all paralyzed. So it was a situation of paralysis, of entire, world mental health basically. And because some people could cope better, some people couldn't. And therefore, those people who couldn't cope developed, serious mental health problems. And we do know that, some people have pre-existing vulnerability, which made them more predisposed to, developing mental problems. For example, people with previous family history of mental disorder, or people who have borderline or pre-diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health problems, people who have genetic loading with mental health problems, people who already have drug and alcohol problems, and people who are frail physically. These individual vulnerabilities that sort of made them more likely to present with mental health disorder following COVID-19. And I have to make you understand that a lot of people contracted COVID during that time, and they were almost dying. Some people died, but some people survived. So those people who survived, it was like a near-death experience for them.
Mm-hmm.
So for those people who have been close to death, they're now presenting with a post-traumatic stress disorder because they've knocked on the door of death. Some of them were on ventilators. Some of them were, in intensive care for a long time, and they were almost dead, but they were able to be brought back alive. So those people also suffer post-traumatic stress disorders as a result of that. And these are the kind of, flavor of mental health disorders that we're seeing in our practice lately.
I mean, it's almost like so much hit the world so much at the same time. But surely there's got to be some kind of silver lining behind all this bad news that you're throwing at us. Is there?
Well, the fact is that we have got better and bigger in the way we, provide our services to our people, because we have seen the evidence, and the level of preparedness for mental health, difficulties have increased. There's increasing investment now in providing psychological aid, psychological first aid, psychological interventions, some other advances in, mental health, interventions. Particularly I work in acute care, so we are the front line of intervention in mental health. We are the ones that will see it. We're like the firefighters, so we see this episode first, and we're the first referrer. So we, gatekeep, people who will come into mental services and people who will be discharged. Particularly in the United Kingdom, the government has recognized the effect of this. The Royal College of Psychiatrists have published a lot of, literatures around, the effect of COVID pandemic on people's mental health, and the effect of global migration as well. As a result of that, due to economic, shutdown of different countries, people have been moving from one place to the other, and that brings, brings its own challenges on its own. So there is a silver line. I think we've learned a lot better. We increase our level of preparedness, and prevention technique, for mental health problems. And I think going forward, the world will be a better place to prevent breakdowns for our population.
Right, and that's great. But I unfortunately we can't say the same. Can we about third world countries? And I hate to call Nigeria a third world country because we really should not be a third world country. But the fact remains is that we probably haven't ramped up in the same way that you in the UK and in the US have ramped up the services. So it leaves us with one thing, in my opinion, how to educate and help people develop the resilience or the coping skills for themselves, first of all for themselves, helping them to first of all recognize when there's a mental health issue that needs help and seek for help if it's available. But also we need to be able to say, okay, what are the basic things that Nigerians, the man on the street, what do they need to know to help build resilience, so that if there's a stressor like a pandemic, God forbid, another pandemic, if there's a stressor or whatever, a family situation, a loss, and there's been a lot of those things happening recently, how can we make it so that they don't fall off the deep end, so that they are already beginning to do the things that are strengthening their mind, strengthening their emotional capacity, so that if and when there's a loss, especially those of us in our 50s now, I mean, we're seeing more of losses now to loved ones than ever before, so that we don't just lose we don't lose hope, and we don't just, like I said, fall off the deep end. I'm trying to look for a better expression than that. Is it that we need to what do we need to do? Exercise more, sleep more. I mean, those are general things. But do you have been an expert in this field? I mean, what are the things that you see that people make mistakes? Maybe they're in error. They don't take care of their mental health in some areas, and then that's why it hits them so hard. I know genetics play a role, but what are the other behavioral lifestyle factors that could make it worse for them?
Yeah, when you talk about third world countries, it's difficult to say because there's paucity of services there, there's paucity of professionals.
Yeah.
So that creates its own challenges. But we do know that also most of the third world country are in a state of perpetual stress. There's stress one way or the other everywhere you turn. And you wonder, how do people manage that? And how do people still cope? I think there's an increased level of resilience amongst those people. And these are by way of adaptation because they haven't seen anything better. I think the possibility or the likelihood of somebody having a serious mental breakdown, is higher for somebody who have been to a first world country like the UK or America, and then they have to return, to a place like Nigeria or Ghana, and they can see the difference. But if you haven't seen the difference, so many people don't really know. So they just think that is the norm, and therefore people have developed their own adaptive skills, But with pandemic, I think all those traditional ways of adapting to stress just broke down. You understand? I mean, whereas a lot of it relies on family, building social capital,
Yes.
Going to work, doing about your businesses, having connections with friends, going to church, going to the mosque, having social groups and all those things. These are traditional ways of bonding and coping and developing what we would refer as, the psychological muscle to be able to fend off all these mental problems. But with the pandemic, everything broke down, and people are just picking up the pieces now. So it's not really one size fits all. I think the most important thing is early detection. The first indicator of mental health disorder is change of behavior. So our people need to be a bit more vigilant about one another. Somebody who has been previously very hardgoing, very talkative, very engaging, suddenly change behavior, becomes withdrawn socially, withdrawn from the society, withdrawn from friends, and then you need to to be concerned that perhaps the person is going through something. A lot of people who would commit suicide normally will tell you or leave a suicide note or give you some telltale signs or warning signs. But some people, they will hide it. They will hide it because it's a stigmatized, sort of a behavior. So some people will hide that behavior and commit the behavior. So, but when we see a change of behavior for somebody who just suddenly disappear, I think we should be worried. We should look for them. And we should try and make contact with them. I think in the third world country, we need to revert back to building social capital, building that social and relying, and that's making sure that social capital is reliable. It's not just a fickle one, not just something that's so superficial. You have to make sure you get a root deep, so that you can rely on them when it matters. Is, a lot of people in third world countries don't have adequate diet. It may sound that, very, very trivial, but you cannot underestimate the impact of, sleep, quality sleep, in mental well-being. I've seen recently a number of patients who were referred to my clinic because the quality of sleep has not been good and they just couldn't manage, and they developed depression and anxiety and panic disorder, and they just, all we needed to do is just treat the sleep or advise them on sleep hygiene. And you can see, because our people in Africa work long hours, they're chasing their economic dreams, Many of them are trapped in traffic. They spend hours in traffic. These are stressors on its own. And when they get to sleep, they don't really have good enough sleep, or long duration of sleep, let alone quality of sleep. And that over a period of time becomes a stress, and it becomes stressful, and then they break down. So you can see, so we need to prioritize, adequate sleep. There should be a balance between the duration of sleep and the duration of work. So we cannot trivialize the importance of that. The importance of having regular diet and regular break in between work. It may sound very like a cliche, but these are things that we see that affects people's mental well-being in our clinic. And all those kind of simple interventions and advice often helps in recovery, of these patients. I think in Africa, we need to look at that, and government needs to introduce policies that would ensure that, people's mental well-being are, prioritized, even far more over physical health. Because people with physical health problems, seem to have a bit of attention because of the feeling of pain, but the effect of psychological pain is even worse. And government needs to ensure that the services that would attend to these people are available. So we need to train a little bit more psychiatric nurses, people who would work within the community services, healthcare professionals within the society and within primary healthcare centers to ensure that at least they can engage with people. A lot of mental health problems involve talking. When people are able to ventilate and talk about their problem rather than, keeping them inside them and ruminating over them, then it solves a lot of the problems with them. I think we need to encourage catharsis. People having an avenue to ventilate their problem in a very confidential and private way. Do you understand? Because one of the fears is that, I don't want to tell this person my problem because then everybody gets to know, what my private matter is. But when we have a confidential and, very private, avenues for people to talk about their difficulties, even listening to that problem alone solves the problem. You may not be able to provide all the solutions, but at least most of the time when people begin to talk about their own problems, they tend to provide a solution while talking. It's just that they haven't had the time to think about it, the solution, because they're so overwhelmed. But when somebody is listening to them in a very therapeutic way, they're able to provide the solution that, hang on, maybe I should have done this. Oh, I didn't even think about it now that it's come to me. And you're able to help them formulate, the way forward. And I think having those kind of ways, either informally or formally, helps a lot of people in their recovery and prevents breakdown of mental health. We cannot underestimate that a lot. I mean, in the United Kingdom, for example, we have various, call centers for different kinds of problems, sexual violence, domestic violence, even LGBTQ, gender identity problems, Samaritans. That will always be a phone call, for people who have just lost their babies, postnatal problems. So people have avenues of talking over the phone. They're not talking to family members. They're talking to, professionals, people who will just listen to them. These things help a lot empirically and anecdotally, a lot of people in their mental health journey. I think Nigerians should, sort of, develop this kind of services within the primary care center, within our various social centers like churches, like, the groups, like Rotary clubs, like different clubs, tennis club, and all those things where people can have and enjoy private and confidential, talk. We've seen in Nigeria some billionaires even committing suicide. They're under the weight of loans and debt, and you will think that everything is looking very beautiful outside, but they're going through a lot, but they don't have anyone to talk to about it. So it's not just the disease of the poor, it's also now the disease of the rich. And COVID has made us to see, has exposed that a lot. So we can see that, the prevalence of mental disorders and problems cuts across different social strata, in our society now, both in Africa and also in the developed world. So I think, generally there should be a venue for people to talk. Now, providing intervention for those cases that are diagnosed, particularly during early intervention, is also important. And you see, mental health is a very specialized field. And, there should be a need for access to trained and qualified professionals who will be able to take the treatment forward for them, not only in diagnosing their problems and also labeling. See, diagnosis is very important because some people, they just want to know what the problem is. They just want to be clear about their diagnosis because they're not sure. And once you're able to evaluate that for them and you give them a diagnosis, it helps them. Then it opens the conversation about treatment and intervention. So you need professionals, trained and qualified people who will be able to do the assessment of their problem and characterize it and diagnose it. And then you can then signpost them to areas where they can have, specialized intervention. And it's not too much for government. I'm happy that in Nigeria, for example, the government has passed the bill for the National Mental Health Bill, which is going to help us develop, the same framework that we have in the United Kingdom. But they need to support that with funding, because there's no point, doing all these things and not funding. Because when you have a bill and you have a different program plan, there's need for adequate funding so that you can retain the right kind of skill that will help our people in solving their mental health difficulties. Nobody wants suicide. Suicide is a very, very difficult thing to cope with. Not only does it affect, the immediate family of the individual, it also affects the community in which the individual has come out from. And there is always, chances of people copying the same behavior. So therefore, we want to make sure that we minimize or reduce to the barest minimum the incidence of suicidal behavior or completion of suicide in our society. So we need to keep the conversation going. The government needs to be involved. They need to engage, our civil societies. They need to engage our people in finding out what do they want with it, how do they want them to help them, and providing an hybrid service that will meet the need of our people and make sure it serves, the community very well. And of course, there's need to audit. There's need to audit, the services and the delivery of the services. Because if it's not audited, then how do you know whether you're actually making impact? So government needs to, make sure that, or whatever services, either through the private or public sector, introduce audit system to make sure that at least we can develop the service going forward. I think there are other things that is also important that will help people build their resilience against mental health problems. I can see and I've heard there's an explosion of drug misuse in Nigeria, particularly in Nigeria now, amongst our youth. And this is a disaster. And that's a worrying trend because a lot of these children have developing brains. And if their brain is already exposed to, serious substances like, opiates, stimulants, cocaine, mixture of different, drugs like speed, Colorado, loud and all ecstasy and all those things. It just develop their brain development. It just destroys their brain development. And that is is a vulnerability and a recipe for developing mental health disorder in the future. Not only do we want to grow healthy society, we want to grow productive, adults, productive, people who contribute to the development of the economy. But when their brain is already damaged by exposure to drugs and alcohol, coupled with, economic and social stressors, these are all combination of serious mental health problems. And our country cannot afford, a large number of our youths, growing up with mental health problems because it does affect overall the, productivity of the country. So therefore, the government needs to ensure that they stop or prevent our people from getting exposed to drug abuse and alcohol abuse that would damage their brain, that would damage the society. Not only does it cause immediate psychological and mental disorder, it does cause serious economic and criminal, complications for our society. And we don't really want that, because when our people who are exposed to drugs, commit crime, then they get involved in the criminal justice system, and then they are lost.
Yes,
they become lost.
Yes.
They're lost completely. So they cannot be productive anymore, because the rehabilitation of an offender in our society like Africa is not really there.
Yes.
Even in developed world, once you have a criminal record, it's very difficult to get rehabilitated into the society.
Right.
So preventing people from getting involved in crime that will lead them into the criminal justice system is key to preventing mental health, because once they are in that system, they are lost. We cannot get them back. And that has its own attendant mental health problem. But not only that, it has a lot of, societal problems as well. And of course, it reduces the gross domestic productivity of a country, because we lost those youth, completely to drugs, and they can't produce for their family, they can't produce for the society, and they become repeat offender. And then, of course, they begin to cause mayhem and havoc and psychopathic behavior within a society. So you can see that, the conversation needs to keep going. It's a dynamic thing. And, like the developed countries, every country should wake up to the challenges that mental health disorder faces. And, when the WHO says that, health is not just the absence of illness, but, the absence of illness, but we have to, the presence of, mental health is key to, well-being and health. And we need to be able to understand that the jigsaw needs to work together to make sure that at least we don't, have a world that is not livable for our children and for our growing generation.
Yes. Oh man, this is so much information. Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
For some reason, my video went off, but I've been with you throughout. But for some reason, my video went. I don't know what's going on, but I know we'll sort it out. But this is
frozen. It looks frozen.
Yeah. Oh, you can see me.
I can see you, but it's frozen.
Oh, I can't even see myself at all. I can't even see myself at all.
Oh, really? I can hear you.
Okay, good. So it's just a few things, touch points I wanted to just touch on. And this is, I totally agree with everything you said. One question I had was with the youth. Why do you think it is that there's been this explosion of this use of drugs? Is it due to a fad, peer pressure? I know in the US, there's more of the whole the mental health thing is a lot greater because of maybe TikTok and all the other social media platforms that have been bombarded so much. Do you think that's the same thing in Nigeria, or are there other reasons? I know you don't work there, but are there other reasons you think?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's the main reason in Nigeria. I think it's pure exploitation. And that is down to the laxity of government prevention, anti-drug prevention mechanism. I mean, drug is a big business for those people selling those drugs. So it enriches some people. And if our system, our government system that's supposed to prevent, supply of these things is weak, then the chances are, as people will be exposed, to this kind of thing very early in life. And something with drug problems is that they just need to catch you once, and once they catch you, the risk of dependence becomes very high. They may introduce them to these drugs and give them free drugs to start with, and once they get hooked, then they become addicted to it. And this is the thing. So it's not about, in Africa, it's not about TikTok. It's not about people watching people using drugs or injecting drugs online or something. It is just about supply, and it's a business thing. It's exploitation, and that is why the penalty for supplying drugs, in places like Nigeria and by extension other African countries should be serious. For those people who engage in those kind of activities, they're destroying our future. So the
Yes.
government needs to improve on the infrastructure, from the custom, from all those, the loopholes, the porous borders, whereby they bring all these things. And even internally, for those people that produce those drugs and supply them, I think, government needs to come with heavy hands on them, because the effect of it is terrible. When I look at, some, images coming out of America, it's hard, rending, because you see people, a whole community of people destroyed by drugs. It's completely, it's painful to see people completely lost, to drugs, and you wonder, how do you recover this kind of people? They're homeless people, they're on the street. Some of people are even in a catatonic state, and they're unresponsive states, and they wake up again, they start chasing drugs. So the entire time of their life is devoted to chasing of drugs, and there's reduction of and narrowing of their repertoire. They cannot even think of work or relationship or positive endeavors. They're all every day waking up and seeking drugs. And imagine in a situation like that, when our children who are meant to go to school, are exposed to drugs, and then they become addicted. That means instead of spending time to study and develop themselves or learning new skills, technical skills or economic skills that will improve their survival, they spend that time, chasing for drugs. And, and some people are giving these drugs to them. Some people are supplying these drugs because they know they're addicted. If you know the psychology of drugs and the biology of drug addiction, you will see that, people who are addicted to drugs, they will always seek out these drug suppliers and dealers, because they need it for them to feel well. And that feeling of wellness is for a short period of time. Then it wanes out again, and then they begin to seek out for more drugs. And then increases, the more of drugs they use. That is business for those people who are leaders. Needs to wake up to the epidemic and the global effect on productivity for our young children. Children who are sent to universities, invest with parental investment, and who are now hooked on drugs. What do you expect of them? What is the value of the investment that the parents are putting to those lives? And even not only is the society, as our society lost, their productive, energy, there's also the criminal aspect of it, and the effect of that, the damage they cause other people. Because some of these people, if they cannot fund their drug lifestyle, they resort to crime. So they resort to crime. They start stealing cars. They rob people. They go into shops and break into shops and destroy people's economic activities, and that causes pain and stress to the victim of those things. And imagine somebody who has borrowed money from the bank and has set up a shop, a small-scale enterprise, and somebody who is a drug-addicted person, breaks into that shop, maybe, with gun or with knife, threaten them, take all their money or their profit or their goods and go away. Not only is that individual who is the victim become vulnerable to mental health breakdown because of that stress, there also is economic loss as well. So you can see, the compound effect of that, on our society. Eventually, that business will close down. People who are dependent on that business for their own livelihood, salaries, and day-to-day living, people whose jobs will be lost. And imagine if somebody who's borrowed money from the bank becomes unable to pay for the bank loan, and what does that mean? There's increased stress. They develop anxiety. They develop panic anxiety, panic disorders, paroxysmal, episodic anxiety, generalized anxiety. Some of them even have mental health breakdown. They have, psychosis. They begin to imagine things. They begin to see things that are not there because they cannot sleep, because they're worrying about the interest rate on the loan they've taken for business, and the business itself has been destroyed by a drug addict who has come into the shops and destroyed them. And not only that, at gunpoint. They've taken away their hard-earned profit. So you can see that, the individual who is the perpetrator, is suffering. The victim also are suffering. So how do we now have a developed society? So we need to be able to look at mental health in a systematic way. That the effect and mathematics, it's all linked together. So we're just using drug addiction now as an example of how mental health can break down. From somebody who's drug addicted, and somebody who's not drug addicted, who's just a member of the public who's law abiding or set up a small business, but has become a victim of a drug addicted individual who has attacked them because of the need to meet their drug addiction needs. So you see, and to be honest, how many of these people are you going to put into prison? Do you understand? So how many are you going to put into prison? We already said earlier that once they get into the criminal justice system, we lost them. They're completely lost. The productivity that we'll get from them is lost. We cannot rehabilitate them. They even get even more exposed to drugs and other vices, even within prisons, within the four walls of the prison. So the best thing is to make sure that we have a prevention strategy, a serious prevention strategy. The people who are supplying the drugs, the government needs to come very heavy on them. I know the American government doesn't joke with that. Even with all the infrastructures and all the paraphernalia they have to fight, combat crime, drug crime, they still have, these problems within their borders, let alone, countries like Africa. I think, we need to engage, our law enforcement agencies a bit more, to make sure that, they wake up to their duties of preventing drugs. And if within their rank and file there are, bad eggs, they need to not hesitate to flush them out. Because a lot of times we have seen that, a lot of these suppliers of drugs, people who are involved in drug supplies or dealing, they have insiders within the law enforcement agencies, and who are collaborators, who are their payroll, and these are people destroying our society, indirectly. And some of these people also, sadly, their children have become victims as well. But at the time they're committing those crimes and having this association with these drug dealers, they don't think about it like that. They think of the immediate gain. They think of the immediate, pecuniary gain. Whereas that pecuniary gain translates into more larger societal and economic and criminal problem for us, for our country. So I think the roots of it needs to be looked into. Government needs to employ technical experts who help them analyze this at every stage, from the point of supply to the point of use, and find a way to intercept, this thing. Let them analyze that, journey, that trajectory, the matrix of drug supply down to the users, to the street users. They need to analyze it, evaluate it, and put prevention strategies in places. They need to increase their intelligence, within that network of drug suppliers, to make sure that this information gets to the right authority to stop the supply of this illicit substances, because we are protecting our mental health. We're protecting our own mental health.
Absolutely.
How do you feel spending thousands and thousands of pounds of dollars on our children education, and only for them to be hooked on drugs, while they're in the university? So what is the return of investment? What is your ROI? How do you feel as a parent? You feel some parents even develop problem from there. They feel a failure. I remember recently I had a patient who came to my clinic. She actually used to live in Florida. She moved to the UK. She has 4 children. One of the children is in prison, and that's her first child. And that is why she came. She wanted to commit suicide because she saw herself as a failure. It was an Afro-Caribbean lady, and and she felt she had 3 other children, but because that one, the first boy, you understand, is in prison, she concluded that she's a failed mother and she wanted to kill herself. And you question, how did that young boy of 18 years old end up in prison?
Yeah.
Do you understand? And the mother already saw the trajectory. She's worried. She's an educated woman. So she felt that all her investment is lost. And she was questioning herself, well, how did she fail? Was it a mistake for her to move from Miami, to live in the UK closer to family because she's a single mother? So, and those are some of the other challenges we have, that predisposes to mental health. When family break down, and we have single parenthood, it's very difficult, and mother has to, provide for their children. It's very difficult to support, all those children, and something always give. Something always give, because while the mother is running around trying to find money to support the children becomes vulnerable. They don't have enough time for comforting, for parenting, and therefore they join gang, and they become involved in knife culture and gang culture within our inner cities, and then they are lost. And then once you are involved in those kind of things, of course, they get involved in drugs, they get involved in crime, they get involved in mental health, or teenage pregnancies. So the complexity, of family and the connection with mental health is something that we also need to look at. How do we stop family breakdown? Because the effect of family breakdown is what I've just told you. And this is a woman, as an example, who moved to be closer to family members in the UK because she felt that she couldn't do it on her own in America. She had her sisters and mother living in the United Kingdom, but not too long after she arrived there, the boy got involved in drugs. She got caught. She's now in prison, and the woman has developed serious mental health problems with presenting suicidal behavior. She didn't even think about the other children that she has. She just felt that she's a failed mother, and she couldn't, get her head around that. What she was running away from in America has come to catch up with her in the United Kingdom. And that son has ended up in prison, and she lost the will to live, and she became very hopeless. So you can see how that indirect situation, led to somebody else's mental health.
Yeah.
And the boy who is in prison, we don't know what is happening to him. Because I worked in prison. I've been a consultant psychiatrist to Her Majesty prisons before. In fact, I understand that, the prevalence of drug use is even higher in the prison society.
How do they get it?
Oh God. You would be surprised different ingenious way people get drugs into prison. You see, it's not just through some, rogue prison warders. Sometimes, prison warders, some of them have been caught, supplying drugs, to because it's a community. And, even though people in prison don't have access to cash, but they have family members who would pay. So whoever is supplying drugs, will go and collect the money, from their family members. So there's a market for it. And secondly, when people have, visitors, to prisons, sometimes they disguise drugs in the Bible. They disguise drugs in children pampers. You see a woman who's come to prison to visit, maybe his partner or a partner who's incarcerated with their baby. But that baby's pamper is, is filled with drugs. yeah. So that's why within the prison services, every week they do, checks. They bring, trained dogs, to prison to sniff, different places, and just to reduce. But despite all that, people still get drugs in. And I remember there's a prison close to where I work that I heard that they used to have, birds, real bird, pigeons. I don't know how they train those pigeons. They will mount drugs on pigeons. And then those pigeons, because they know the flight trajectory all the time. Yeah. So one way or the other, they catch these pigeons, they put them drugs on them, and those pigeons will fly to the prisons. And of course, they perch there, and then they collect they harvest the drugs from them. Then when they realize that was, I'm telling you, when they realize that, the government now had to put like a roof on the entire square miles of prison, facilities just to prevent pigeons from hatching or coming inside, and or even drones. Yeah, even drones. They used to use drones, to come and supply drugs and all. And sometimes some prisoners have day out. They have leave. When they go out on leave, some of them they colluded with some prison warders. They don't check them. They don't check them. In my acute ward, many times I have drug problems within the ward. These are people with mental health receiving treatment. But I just see that the rate of recovery is not what I wanted. It's not what I expected. These people are getting worse. What is going on? Because when you give them leave with their family members, they go and bring drugs into the ward, and they supply drugs amongst their own, the other inmates or other patients within the ward. And you see that the more treatment you provide, these people are not getting better. So we have to keep doing urine drug screen all the time. And even that, some of them will dare you. They know that, well, at the end of the day, you cancel or revoke their leave, privileges. But at least that one time that you've given them opportunity to go on leave, just to apply the least restrictive option, they will bring drug into the ward. Whether they're selling it or not, I don't know, because you won't see money exchange hands, but they have very crypto way, like a cryptocurrency kind of ways of, exchanging money, when they bring drugs in and supply drugs. Yeah. So they have ingenious ways of doing it. I will tell you, this one actually, was very shocking to me, that in prison, if somebody, is using drugs actively, for example, let's say heroin, some of them, they would scrape their skin because their body they're always using heroin. They have access to heroin all the time. But other people who also need heroin are not available and cannot see this drug. Now, they now scrape their own skin. When that skin will develop scabs, develop, like a scab. That scab, of course, has heroin in it. So they will sell that scab to one another, to other person who wants some, cravings from opiates.
Which you're kidding. They'll sell their skin.
I'm telling you, they scrape their skin, and that's bleeding, and it's just superficial injury. They scrape it, and then they allow it to grow and form a scab. That scab is a commodity. They sell it to another person who is also heroin dependent in prison.
So does the person now eat that person's skin, or how does that work?
Yeah, no. It's a scab. They eat it. Yes, they eat it in prison. You see, drug addiction is a very terrible thing. They would do anything. If they would kill somebody just to have just one fix, what else can they not do? Do you get my point? So that's another thing. When I saw that, I was shocked. The people graze their own skin to form scab, and then that scab becomes a commodity within the prison service. Some people will buy and eat that scab, and of course they keep doing it every time and then scraping, because for some reason they have connection with people who supply them heroin, and then of course other people don't have, or they don't have the means, so they help each other, and they do this kind of thing. And some of them also, they use their own vomit. And then you give them methadone substitution, as an opiate substitution for them. You would think they swallowed it. They have the ability to regurgitate in their room what you've given them, so that they can sell it to other people.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you, it's crazy what's going on there. So the best thing is not to prevent addiction, to make sure that, and you will know the effect of drug addiction. A lot of these people, have high risk of mortality due to changing landscape of tolerance. Particularly if they've been in prison for a very long time and they've not had access to drugs, and they are released. Their tolerance during the period of incarceration would have changed, and they don't know the science or the biology of addiction or dependence. They don't understand things about their tolerance. They will get released from prison. The next thing is they want a fix.
Yeah, of
Maybe
course.
they'll be using 20-pound worth every day to keep them going, and that's their own body tolerance. By the time you went to prison and come out, your tolerance has reduced. You shouldn't even be using 2-pound worth. But they don't understand that. And many of these people, the first thing once they release, they'll phone their dealer or go to their dealer and they'll be asking for 20 pounds. What does that mean? It means that the moment they take the 20 pounds, they go into drug overdose. They go into drug overdose and some of them die instantly because, their tolerance, while they were in prison have changed and they didn't understand the concept of tolerance change. And
yeah.
therefore, they are exposed to drug overdose. And oftentimes, they don't have, ways of reversing these things because where they use the drugs is always very crypto. It's very secret. They hide in one corner in their rooms. So many times I've been to people's house as a forensic physician to certify people dead in their own home due to drug overdose. They just released from prison. The police will call me. They haven't seen this person for a long time. There's a strange smell coming from that room.
Yeah.
Neighbors will call the police, and then they will ask for forensic, and then we would have to go in and certify them dead. And you would have seen that the cause of death is drug overdose. And when you see a letter of discharge from prison from them, and they've just been to use drugs, and then that has killed them. Yeah. So what we've done in the UK, is to provide naloxone, injection in different strategic places, in the community. So anybody, so that makes it easy. They don't have to buy it. In different areas where we know the addicted people congregate, we put naloxone there in different communities. So anybody you see, expressing signs of drug overdose, you can easily, other people who are also drug users knows how to use that because we've trained them. So they can jab them and try to reverse, the overdose and then call the ambulance for them to take them to hospital. But you see, in as much as that intervention is helpful and reduces the incidence of drug overdose in the UK, but we still have a lot of people who would use these things in their rooms, in the secret places, and they still die of overdoses. And the same thing happens with alcohol as well, and the same thing happens with alcohol. So you can see that all these things, when we say drug and alcohol, it is not as simple as we talk about. The effect on mental health, both in Africa and in the developed world, is huge.
Right.
It's huge. And that is what I've described to you, and there are so many added factors that are attached to it as well.
There is so much involved in this thing. Oh my goodness. And I mean, I'm just listening to you talk, and I'm like, it's almost like you need someone who can actually sit down and who has clouting both with the government and with business and put together a strategy and sit down with it and drive this project, not just a project now, but maybe a whole department in Ministry of Health or something, but has access to the presidency or even maybe a separate agency in Nigeria where that's concerned, and really push it. Because it's not the kind of thing you just say, we just leave it to this department or that department in the Ministry of Health. I mean, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And if we don't...
Honestly, it's getting worse. I think the government has responsibility, and it's because people in developing societies like Nigeria, Ghana, and other places don't have accountability to individuals' lives.
Yeah.
There's no corona services. You understand? Once you are dead, you're dead for good. It's your family problem.
Yeah.
But in developed economy and society, even if the person is a drug addict or an alcohol dependent person, if they die, there will still be a process of corona. Somebody must take responsibility in the sense that at least you must explain how the person died. Did they fall through the net? What happened? How did we miss it? And they always want to learn lessons. I think Nigeria, for example, needs to develop that culture of placing a lot of premium on people's lives. The government needs to see that every life matters. Every life matters. And once that attitude is imbibed by the government, then they'll begin to develop appropriate intervention policies, that will support well-being, mental well-being, and people's survival and recovery process. I think, we need, our government just don't show enough care, and unless it becomes their own personal problem, it's a personal problem, a family problem, then you see them running helter-skelter. But there's need for a population-wide approach, and government should place premium on individual lives. And as I said to you, the youth of today are the future of tomorrow, like they say.
Yes.
And when we say that, we're not, it's not a cliche, it is the truth. Because if the youth that you train today, me and you we were once youth, weren't we?
Yes.
We were once youth. Yes. I mean, the productivity that we are giving to the world today, imagine if we are derailed.
Yeah.
Who will benefit from that?
Yeah.
Do you understand? We were once youth. And if put into our lives and what we got in our education is producing these global benefits. Imagine if the government in Nigeria and Africa recognizes that and they're able to sort of seriously tackle this thing and make sure that every factor that would bring people down and derail them is addressed. Then it's not just about increasing foreign direct investment. Some people need to manage that investment. If you don't have good heads to manage the investment, then it's going to be lost. So, investing in our children, in our education, in protecting them, making sure that we provide right intervention to prevent their mental health and from deteriorating or having accidents in their mental well-being and emotional well-being, then the better for the society generally.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.